I want to talk about what happens when you freeze in an interview. It is really inevitable that at some point in time in your technical interview journey, because it is a journey, you will freeze and have utterly no idea what to say and have no clue how to solve a problem. It's going to happen. It's happened to me at least, I don't even know how many times it's happened, but off the top of my head, I can remember it happening three very distinct times. And one time I forgot how to write a for loop. We've talked about that on the channel, but again, I just got so used to taking advantage of the autocomplete on my IDE that I forgot how to do basic syntax. And I looked like I was so embarrassed, and I'm like, well, I'm not getting that one. And a second time, I just wrote the craziest logic in a loop. I mean, it was so off the wall. I was writing just I made so many variables to track so much state. I was in all to do such a basic thing that should have taken me like 3 lines. I wrote like 50 lines of code. And because you inevitably, people talk about doom scrolling. I think that in code there's like doom typing because whenever it's like when something in us when you start a problem and you can't figure it out, you just start typing and you start writing code and you start just adding and adding all these checks and logic and you overthink it and all of a sudden you've written this whole mess that makes zero sense and then you try to go back and rework it and then when you rework it it makes it worse and you just doom typing for the whole thing. And that's exactly what I did. And it made zero sense. It didn't work. It didn't compile. And needless to say, I didn't get that one either. And the third time that I completely just froze was I was asked a question about it was just a verbal question and I really had no idea what the answer was. And I think I'm trying to remember, I think it was a .NET related question. And I just made something up and I was like, well, I think it's for this. And I just completely froze. And I just uttered just nonsense for like 2 minutes. And it was completely wrong. And I've had so many other instances where I've just completely froze and I've just given such bad answers when I should have just up front said, I'm not sure. And I think that it takes a degree of confidence to say that you don't know. And I think it's hard to do that because you don't want to feel like, you're trying to make a good impression. And I think sometimes we think to ourselves that by not knowing something, it gives off a bad impression. When I think it's actually the opposite. I think that if you're upfront and say, I'm not sure about that one. I think that actually looks better than if somebody just tries to make something up for 5 minutes. Because usually the person listening is knows like if you know what you're talking about after a little bit of time. And I think it looks worse if you try to make up the fact that you know something when in reality you don't. So, but yeah, this freezing in an interview, it's scary and it happens to everybody. And I think it happens throughout your career because it's impossible to know everything. It's impossible to be an expert at everything. You can know a little bit about a lot of things, but to truly be an expert and understand everything is probably not going to happen, at least for the vast majority of us. And so in an interview, you're bound to get asked something that you don't know at some point in time, whatever stage of your career you're at. And so to avoid freezing, or to avoid that 30 seconds of just internal panic and conflict and, thinking about worst case scenario, like, oh, I'm not going to get the job because I don't know this answer. Just take a breath, just calm down. And if you don't know, just say you don't know and leave it at that because there's nothing more to be said. If you don't know, you can't make up that you know. If you don't know, you can't get there by typing 50 lines of code, right? You can't get there by talking about something for 5 minutes that you don't know. You'll try. You will try sometimes, but I just don't think that that leads to success. Now, maybe for some people it does. I don't know. But I think that freezing, again, is natural. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to everybody, whether they want it to or not. I don't care how much you study. Sometimes you just forget. We all forget. We're just people. And sometimes you can study something 10 times the day before, the next day you forget it. And that's life. And that's part of this journey. And that's why technical interviews can be frustrating, is because it feels like you have one shot to remember everything possible, right? To remember everything that you've ever studied and every piece of code that you've written and every technology. It can feel like that. And that's why it does take a lot of studying to, so you can get to that 75, 80% of, being able to complete the interview successfully. But you're never going to complete it to 100%. You're never going to answer everything to a T perfectly. It's just not going to happen. And, that's okay. Freezing is okay. And if you freeze in an interview, especially for an extended period of time, don't see that as a bad thing. Just see it as a learning opportunity to say to yourself, okay, what could I have done better? How can I improve next time? And how can I avoid having that awkward silence where everybody knows that I don't know it, but I'm trying to make it seem like I'm thinking? And there is a time for thinking, and there is a strategy to allow time for you to think. You can repeat the question back. You can ask questions about what what the prompt is. You can ask questions to further expand on what the problem is. You can do a number of those things to buy yourself some time to think. But after you have done those and you've legitimately thought about the problem and you still can't figure it out, then I think it's appropriate to say that you don't know. Because you've kind of expended the time that you can, that you're allotted to think. And to freeze and not and just for, especially for 5 minutes, is not really that productive. And if you don't know, I think that you just have to say you don't know. Now it's difficult, right? Because it feels like you're kind of giving up the opportunity on the spot when you say I don't know. And it feels like you're kind of forfeiting the job offer when you do that. And it's a scary feeling. I fully understand this. I've been there many, many times. I've failed many interviews. I've failed many technical interviews, and I've froze in an interview many, many times. So I completely get it. It's very scary, especially when a job is on the line and money's on the line, right? It's very scary. So, you know, put in as much studying time as you possibly can. Read and study and work problems and make projects as much as you can. But if that time comes and you get to one question and you do freeze, feel confident to say that you don't know, but feel confident in the fact that it might not all be riding on this one question that you don't know. And you don't have to know everything 100%. You don't have to know everything perfect. And I think it's more about the conversation and more about the problem solving ability that you show anyway, rather than your just ability to answer everything 100% to a T. So hopefully this was helpful. But yeah, I completely understand freezing is very, very scary. So that's all I got for today. I'll see you in the next one.